Welcome to the Startup of Human Potential.
I'm Clifton,
And I'm Victoria.
and together we are Faces of the Future. Faces of the Future is a startup studio with a personal development platform at the intersection of consciousness, connection, innovation, and well-being. We're excited to have you join us on our show today.
And today we're excited to be joined by one of our dear friends, Kodah Pipitone. On the entrepreneurial side, he's been a founder and partner in government technologies, consumer wearables, private equity, and management consulting. On the quantum side, he studied with the ancient lineages of the Ashaninka, Yawanawa, and Lakota indigenous peoples, practices various biohacking modalities. He's a student of consciousness and peak performance, futurist, love talking about technology with Kodah, and a masculinity and presence coach for men. And I just have to say, one of the most unique individuals I've ever met in my life.
Yeah, very
One of the
true.
first times Clifton and I connected with him, he said he's a cyber elf from the future, and he did not disappoint. And his life story is just the proof in the pudding, which he'll share and go into on this podcast. But I was fascinated because he's the only person I've ever met who's started in this world as male, transitioned to female for 8 years, and then came back to male. And we had the pleasure and honor of working with him during that incredible transformation. So I'll leave it here. I'll let Kodah speak for himself. Welcome. So excited to have you here.
Yeah, I'm grateful to be here. Thank you for your kind words, and thank you for our friendship and all the different synergies all around that. I always look forward to dropping in with Clifton and Victoria here, and whenever I can, going up to visit the Topanguans up in Topanga near Los Angeles, where it's a whole different vortex, and the upgrades take many days to integrate thereafter. So I'm overdue for a visit. I'm calling in from Las Vegas today, where I'm here at the Arcadia Festival with Aubrey Marcus's community, and dropping in and tuning in with a lot of folks, and staying at a dear brother's house who I met through the Flow Genome Project. We actually had the opportunity to do a 7-day off-grid through hike in the Dark Canyon, Utah together. So we went super deep. It was right during the eclipse, the ring of fire in the sky that we got to view and channel. So really looking forward to this connection.
Amazing. Was that the Himalayas of Utah? Kodah is quite the linguist as well, and coined the phrase that Topanga is the Himalayas of Los Angeles, and that house that he was talking about, he coined, was a spiritual hospital.
Was it inaccurate?
He's
It
got a
wasn't.
great way of naming things and just the mastery of the English language. We talked about with on some other episodes, like with Cherie, is just sort of the power of language and the power of naming things. Sometimes you never know what sticks and what doesn't stick, and that one certainly has stuck for us and with our clients and just in our network. So, another amazing thing about Kodah is he is a master networker. He's probably one of the most connected people to all the community in the spiritual conscious space, the peak performance space, and also in the investment space. So it's such an honor and privilege to reconnect with him, and I'm excited to dive into your story and how all of this came to be.
Looking forward. Where do we start?
When did you first know that you were a master linguist?
Well, the world's made of words. If you know the words, you make the world. So there was this piece where I learned about the generative principle. What we care about manifests in our world, and the mechanism by which that happens is our word. And there's a difference between just talking in your head and actually rooting in your heart and emitting that logos, that living word of truth. And when you get into those technologies, the world conforms. So in the journey of embodiment, I came through the intellectualization of self. I engineered my body to conform to the ideas that I had generated here in that mimetic space. And that's not the directionality we want, right? I started there and I got it forcefully into here, and it kind of worked, but after a while the system started displaying error messages, and then the biometrics started confirming those, and the course correction then unfolded. And through that direct experience of having used word to create my embodiment and create my reality, and also launch companies and lead teams, I realized the power of those words and then the responsibility to the things you generate with logos. And I can also go deeper into when I used to have microphones in front of my face talking about trans politics and really inspiring a generation of young people to go forward with that method of intervention in their lives and the real newness of that technology. And I now sit with the responsibility for having inspired really directly the castration of a generation.
Wow.
And what's the karma of that I've been working on for the last decade? Possibility. So to answer your question, I had a deep experience using word to create action in others, to wield influence. And during that time of really activism, lobbying, social justice, doubled down in manifesting in the venture space. And now it's become really tuned in with studying in these lineages, studying with the ancients, and knowing that word doesn't always require syntax and grammar. Word is just vibratory. And those ancient chants and sounds and frequencies that we all know so much about and use in our lives every day, whether we're downloading the binaural beat or using the haptic devices, we are in a vibrational relationship with others. And that is it. So we are all always masters of language because we are being in our reality, which is that vibration. So I could riff on that further, but I think I've addressed the question a little bit.
Yeah, there's a lot of gems in what you just shared. When you were sharing about like word creating the material action, the embodiment, I remember you sharing with us about how we program ourselves with words. And through listening to it when we're in that suggestible, receptive state, it can really influence our actions and like the embodiment of a specific agenda or idea, right?
Yeah, this is the meme factories of our culture and the
Yeah.
cultural architecture that we all operate within. And you know, when you get still, I just had a 6-day silent meditation with Jack Cornfield.
Mhm.
And in that stillness, all of those subconscious and even unconscious frames and linguistic artifacts and memes just come bubbling up.
What I was touching on was kind of like how you went through that embodiment shift of transitioning from being a male to a
Yeah,
female, and it started with the word and the information
yeah,
that you were receiving that you were then embodying.
yeah,
Then that shifted your whole identity because Clifton and I, we do identity shifts. We work with identity expansion, people as they evolve from being an entrepreneur to a funded entrepreneur or go through some period of change in their lives. And you like literally changed your identity, changed your gender with the identity, changed the
yeah.
identity, changed the gender, and biohacked like each gender to perfection. You know what I mean?
Thank you. Yeah, yeah, let's go there. So the ideas that have a strong resonance in the culture space, a lot of stuff around agency, autonomy, and expression, which are healthy, and tolerance is critical. But then and shame is really dissonant, and we can design civilization interconnected without shame. We can do that. It's a very rational and utilitarian way to build policy. But just going specific, things like I am a woman.
Mhm.
And if you're in an open receptive state, even a hypnagogic state, and you have resonance with that, you can accept it as true against your objective biological reality, and you can begin to align to that and then forget how deeply that resonated, come into waking consciousness, and then have
Mhm.
it there. Or things like you can be whatever you want to be. Yes. And you already deeply want to be what you are because you've materially generated that. So there's this nuance of what I want from the ego versus what I want, i.e., what I am already in this reality. And we often think the ego is generating the language and therefore it'll work in the world. But actually, it's the beingness that is the language already always happening. And when we align with that flow upstream and then embody that and echo that with our language, then it is a deeper truth current. So there's
Right.
something in, I'm already saying I am male. I'm already saying I am man. So when I say, and I think that I'm in resonance with egoically with this alternative that I can be whatever I want, I can
Mhm.
biohack, engineer, or transform, and it's not actually grounded in the truth of this reality, I can either retroactively try and reframe all of the past indicators in my ontology to justify it,
Mm-hmm.
and then maintain the intellectual investment in that until it habituates, and then I can run a system. But ultimately, in the face of truth and ancient medicine that unlocks that truth, that will vibrate out, because that's just actually not the material truth. So I think that those little pieces in be the change you want to be in the world, coupled on top of this too much liquidity in where your identity is grounded. And you can open these possibilities of you get a tattoo, grow your hair out, whatever you want to do, bodily autonomy. But there's also, what are you already being?
Yeah.
And can you be in integrity with that and then express and adorn? But if you go and get out of integrity with what you're already being, your language loses force. And there's some kind of lack of material conviction in the integrity that you're being.
So what I'm hearing you share is some of the rails and or cautionary tales around just how far you want to take egoic identity expansion or redesign,
Mm-hmm.
and some of the coded limitations that are well served, and there's a reason why there's those
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
limitations, and the experience of trying to push the bounds of those limitations. Is
Yeah.
that what I'm hearing?
Yes, it is. It is. If the body is an instrument, I
Mm-hmm.
play guitar. So it's like, okay, we can play music on the guitar. Yes, you can modify your guitar, but wouldn't it be nice if you learned how to play it first? I look
Mm-hmm.
at a lot of folks in this bodily
Mm.
augmentation, if
Yeah.
keeping it in a little less charged, if they like plastic surgeries and things. Okay, great, but they're tweaking, augmenting the guitar, but this thing can do a lot as it is. So let's
Yeah.
get in
Before
there
we
what we
try to
already
convert it to a
have.
violin,
Yeah.
let's see how the guitar works.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Mhm.
And the act of picking up another instrument with the body. Any genetic biologist will tell you there's a cascade of sexual speciation from conception, fertilization of the egg, the
Wait,
Mhm.
sperm
what's
every
that
cell
term mean?
contains.
Sexual what?
Uh, Speciation. So
Oh,
it speciates your chromosomal expression, begins to build the
Take shape.
proteins and construct your biology in alignment with a trajectory of sexual development. I can nerd
Mhm.
out about the endocrine
Good thing we
system,
talked
prenatal
about
washes.
embryology if Dr.
Yeah,
yeah, and
Stephen
your body
Schwartz.
yeah,
is the tool. So, I mean, if you haven't checked
yeah.
out a precursor to this convo, it might just be the one we just recorded with Dr. Stephen Schwartz to get you
Yeah.
caught up, because we're going deep here with Kodah.
Yeah, we just deep
Every
divers.
everything's
Yeah.
linear. Our episodes kind of stack on one another organically. So I love it. I'm here for it. Let's go.
Yeah. So to make sure that lands for folks, right?
Yeah.
Just what I was and we can go deeper if it's of interest, but there are cascades of hormonal development that then inform psychological development, peer bonding, sociological
Sure.
development. And then once you've finished the primary puberty, your sex characteristics and secondary sex characteristics, and there's neurological puberty. And that's more context based. So that's your social dynamics, your culture, your environment. And that's
Mhm.
how you peer bond. There's something around white matter in the brain that may or
Mhm.
may not objectively stabilize, that has some kind of brain sex. But that can not always align in the binary. So if you're male, you could have, just for whatever cultural reasons, develop what another culture might say is more of a feminine brain or a masculine brain. But that, it left in a healthy state with a smaller sample set of community that we historically operated in for hundreds of thousands of years, it would typically express in masculine would develop out of maleness and feminine would develop out of femaleness. Our culture is global, interconnected, and evolving. So we get this unique set of contexts, inputs, and we then have our brain develops based on our input and interaction with our environment, and we then can have some
Mhm.
dissonance there, and the workability of that will be resolved at the first lap through using that system. So early 20s, neurological puberty completes, and then late
Mhm.
20s, dark night of the soul territory, error
Saturn
messages are,
returns.
yeah.
So what was that kernel that what was in you, like from what you were sharing, that made you want to explore being female during that period in your life?
Yeah. Oh, awesome. So I've always been a straight male, and sexuality is very different. It's olfactory, and you're drawn to the pheromones, hormones of compatibility to another, and then
Mhm.
you're just attracted. If you're androgenic, you typically have an externally referenced sex drive, and you're attracted by the aesthetic and the energy of someone. If you're estrogenic, you typically receive attention and like that or don't like that. So I was successfully in relationships my whole life. But if I go to childhood and
Mhm.
look, I grew up, I'm an Italian American. My dad's Sicilian, my mother's Southern Italian. and go there and look at masculinity, you get what I have. Fashion sense, you get maybe dancers, you get a lot of hand movements, people spilling wine everywhere. I would have been totally normal in that context, but in the conservative post-World War II fathering that my father went through, he had to shut a little bit of that down. And then when he passed that on to me, I grew up on a horse farm. So me and my brother were fixing fence posts, fixing barn, tractors, baling hay, mowing 27 acres of grass and taking care of horses while my sisters did gymnastics and played piano. I was super interested and fascinated by that, by Bach and Beethoven and Chopin. And I was like, I want to do that. And my mom was like, go outside and work. Shut it down. Right? I love my parents and they're great and they love me, but there was just their template. I was aware that there were aspects that I just didn't know where to express them. And then when I discovered art, I just loved it and I had a safe place and all was good. But there were periods like 6 years old before I understood that I was not like my sisters, and I would hang out with my sisters and do art, and my brother would make fun of me. So then I'd shut that down. And then I had this seed that, oh, maybe the way into that was to not be connected to my brother, was to be connected to my sisters. And that seed was just not really consciously engaged with until I got to puberty and started having a sex drive. And I saw literature of essentially cross-dressers and then going these whole like stealth experiences as a woman. I was like, whoa, that was wild. And I just went down a rabbit hole on that a couple times, and it was not noteworthy, but I was interested. And then that went away. I had a relationship and it was no problem. And I was like, well, everybody's read about this, right? And then I realized in college, like, nobody else did that. Oh, okay. Interesting. Note. Fine. Went into a stable relationship. Started traveling the world after college and saw very different content from Jerry Springer. I didn't see these sex workers and really clearly not honorable expressions of what we call transness. I saw Hijra in India, who were doulas at birth and were essentially priestesses. I saw the Bisu in Indonesia, who are the lawyers who are gender neutral. And I started reading about Ethiopian shaman who are like castrate themselves ceremonially and live without. I was like, wait, maybe that thread, maybe there's a seed in me. And I started just Googling, and I started finding this trans stuff. Simultaneously, I was into meditation, long distance running. This was 2010, 2012. So I knew about this guy named Tim Ferriss on YouTube, and he was talking about Wim Hof. So I was doing that kind of biohacking before it was mainstream. I was the barefoot shoe guy over in Japan, teaching English and running, eating mushroom coffees and stuff. And I was in that thread, and then I found binaural beats, haptics, and self-hypnosis. And I started self-hypnosis and found this erotic self-hypnosis. I had this energetic orgasm. So, wow, what is this? There's so much more in the world that I wasn't aware of. My chakras are balanced and I'm channeling energy.
Wow.
Healthy stuff, right? But then I was a 20-year-old, 21, and my long-term partner, she went away for a business trip, and I didn't know how to take care of myself. So I found pornography again, and I was like, wait, is there hypnosis pornography?
Wow.
And there is hypnosis pornography, and it's dangerous. It's neurosomatic brainwashing. And in those experiences, a lot of the content is for repressed sexuality.
Yeah.
Which I didn't have, but they were the better audio files. So I got it.
Sorry, one more time.
I didn't have repressed sexuality. I was pretty sexually expressed, but the audio stimulation, the content was just like, wow, that wasn't like a drug.
But from what you were sharing earlier, like growing up in the environment with your sisters who got to express their creativity, their arts, their gifts, that sounded like really appealing to you versus cleaning and building fences outside on the farm. So not a repressed sexuality, but maybe a repressed feminine energy.
Expression. Exactly. So I wasn't that clear on that. I was still early 20s, neurological puberty. And I had this, I was painting, and I wasn't yet a dancer. I am now. But I was painting, and I wasn't yet into fashion, but I am now. And it was like, I still didn't have a healthy expressions for that feminine. So it was building up. So that's what drove me to, a lot of this hypnotic content is about transforming into a woman and then having sex as a woman, because you can have multiple orgasms in these hypnotic trances. So I was like, whoa, that got my feminine satisfied. But then I also got the language input that I might be trans, I might be a woman. And it was under trance in a hypnotic state, anchored in orgasm. So it went deep, and then I'm in
Powerful.
conscious waking state, had forgot about those
Yeah.
implants, had to go back and read the scripts, analyze the videos, and then make a counter script and reprogram myself to heal from that.
Yeah, and not
But
only, like, are you in that trance state, but, like, you're getting dopamine hits and explosions of chemicals in your brain with the orgasm that reinforces that state, creating that positive feedback loop to
yeah,
perpetuate that whole direction.
yeah. So
Crazy.
it was super
Fascinating.
motivational and habit forming and addictive. And then,
Yeah.
by the way, when you Google about it, I checked all the boxes for someone who's likely trans. When I got back to the United States, everybody was like, trans tipping point.
What
So,
year was that?
okay, 2014. So the zeitgeist had a lot of momentum. And I was not ready to jump in, but I studied ethics, world religions, and economics. So I was interested in helping. And I just
Mhm.
started doing work around anti-human trafficking and a lot of this stuff that happens to people who are in survival sex work. And
Mm.
that led me into proximity with trans people. And now my community of trans people who are drinking the Kool-Aid, speaking the ideology, bringing the language in. And then my therapist was right this way. You should probably do this next. You should probably do that next.
Jeez.
So I got on the conveyor belt
Wow.
and I was terrified, but all the science said that if I didn't address it, I would become suicidal ideation or something by
Mhm.
mid-age, which is a grain of truth in that, right? If you don't have a healthy expression of the feminine, it will fester. But it
Mhm.
doesn't, that science doesn't justify go all in bodily augmentation and castration.
Right.
So a key distinction, right? 20-year-old, 22-year-old, at the time I was John, that didn't have the restraint and the awareness and the distinctions that I have now. So I just went full in, did the hard thing. I mustered up
And I
courage and
know
was like,
you,
oh,
you hate surgeries and,
I
like,
hate
cutting your
surgery.
body, you're afraid of needles, or I don't know if you
Yeah,
still are, but you've shared
I've
with us
worked a lot on that.
previously.
No, I can self-inject finally now. Yeah,
Okay.
Wow.
yeah, we can talk about
So you were a
that,
high
healing from that.
performer
Good.
headed straight into a conveyor belt of a
Mm,
gender transition.
mm. So I became a lobbyist, public speaker. I changed systems to make that path easier because not only could I figure it out, but I also figured out how to improve it. So the
Mm.
trans people that are just wards of the state, just give me a social service check, cover my medical bills. And there are trans people who are, let me figure this out, autodidactic. And I was that
Mhm.
latter. So I, force of nature, advocated for more efficient policy. And I stand by harm reduction policies,
Mhm.
stand by a world that's better, that we have space for people to go through the process. I don't stand by policies that touch our children, that supersede the powers of family and parents over their children. I don't
Mhm.
stand by bringing these irreversible processes into the developmental cycles of children. And
Mhm.
that's when I left that movement.
You were
So
finally like, this
that,
is too much. This is too far. This
yeah,
hits your ethical, moral
very
Mm.
much so.
compass. Okay.
Yeah, this isn't giving people space to breathe. This is a wedge between parents and children, which is breaking the container necessary to develop human consciousness.
Mhm.
Wow.
That's a negative cascade and negative trajectory for our species.
Can
So
we
very
explore
adamant
that?
opposed.
Just unpack that one
Yeah,
because that seems to be like
yeah.
a pretty solid tipping point for you along this journey was the power of family. What is it about family that you feel so strongly about maintaining?
Mhm.
I'm Italian, man.
Mm.
The roots go deep.
I had a
Blood,
feeling this
Italian blood. Like, come on. People see this nose and like, I get a job. If I go to any little Italy in any city in the world, walk into a bar or restaurant, and like, hey, you need hiring? Even if there's not a job, like, yeah, come in tomorrow. Like, no problem. And that served me throughout my life. And my brother's special forces candidate for a while there, and now he's career military. And he was like, I really disagree with what you're doing, but I love you, and
Mm.
I would die for you.
Mm.
And yeah, so like huge. And across all that. And then my father, so he has a very successful business in Baltimore, heating and air conditioning. His father built it as an entrepreneur that was tech in the 70s, 80s. That was technology. And they built a great company. When I would be on TV or the radio in Baltimore, and his clients would say, oh, it must be hard having a kid caught up in this whole trans thing. Like, I feel sorry for you. And he would just respond like, no, it's not like that.
Mhm.
Like, I love my son. I love my kid. Whatever.
Wow.
So that, like, when he was not equipped with the intellectual um, training and education that I was gifted by virtue of his hard work, he still was able to say, no, I'm here for family.
Mm.
Like, don't mess with my family.
Wow.
Yeah. My
That's
mother
really
also just,
beautiful.
yeah. And my mom was just like, what do I have to do? I don't understand. I don't get it.
Yeah.
But it's just, okay, what do I got to do? I'm there.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So those bonds, you don't break those bonds unless you have
Mhm.
good reason. And I've always got that. So, and whatever your family is, family could be chosen, right? I had a lot of experience during that time in the trans community and the polyamorous community as well. And I saw stable structures of multi-participant relationships. It works. There are tribes that have polygamy. There are tribes that raise the kids in the village that intentionally have multiple male partners so you don't know who the biological father is. There's all these examples. The
Mhm.
key is your sexual energy grounded? Are you in a healthy
Mhm.
relationship? And if that checks, then the social function is satisfied, and now we can have a safe society for kids and children and women, and the male energy, that male sexual energy is grounded. If it's not, there's no family, there's no containers for development, and we're all
Mhm.
just crashing into each other.
Wow.
So that's deep. And it seems to be like a very solid experience that you've gone through to embody that statement. What is it about grounding your sexuality that you're here to help share, or just by your own experience, you're here to proselytize or just bring awareness to?
Yeah, so that's a deep question. I think that there is an atrophy in masculine presence in our culture.
Mm.
And because of that, while there may be fathers in some cases, not all, there's a deficit in fathers, full stop. But
Mhm.
in the fathers that are there, the masculinity isn't passing on.
Yeah.
Mm.
And that is the technology we use to wield that part of our human animal, which is sexual, which has potential for violence, which wraps that around a code of honor, right? You don't just say, I will never touch this part of me and repress it.
Mhm.
I heard last night from a military veteran, one of his mentors said, if you don't have a relationship to your potential to kill, you cannot have a relationship to your potential to care. He said, if you don't have your kill, you
Mm.
don't have your care. And that was an intense frame,
Mhm.
but I get it. I get it. When I found men's work and I started saying, hey, I feel sometimes I just wanna, like, it's in me. And then they said, yes, brother, bring that to the circle. I did. And I got to express it. And then I got to see it cathartic, got to release that charge. And then my heart could flow again. I knew it wasn't wrong or shameful to know that I have this capability to direct my energy down and out, this yang potential in my energy. And I didn't shut that down, because when calibrated and intentionally deployed with honor, that's the same energy we use to build infrastructure, to build buildings, roads. That's how we assemble companies. That's how we close deals.
Yeah.
So shutting that down was actually shutting down many aspects of my life.
Mhm. So what made you wanna reconnect back with that energy? And, like, what was that kernel that brought you
Mhm.
full circle, not full circle, but into a whole different space of being this new kind of male, having gone through the experience of being female all those years?
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of learnings in the female social space too, and communicating in that language and learning this, all the nonviolent communication, authentic relating technology is very feminine, but it's also very useful. And I recommend men to
Mhm.
train up in those skills, but still ground in the masculine frame, right? Make it no problem, cut a clear path through the wilderness. Whereas a lot of the feminine technology is the vines and the trees and the roots, and it's a very different set of value. So the inflection point and the anchor in masculinity, be the change you want to be in the world. And when I ingested all the feminist ideology around that framework of women's liberation, which really forms an imbalance just in the other direction, I framed the masculine as the root of all evil, framed patriarchy as
Yeah.
bad, capitalism as bad. Then couldn't see the fact that per capita that we're experiencing more peace under capitalism and meritocracy than under the previous
Mhm.
governmental technologies of federations and feudalism. So
Mhm.
there is actually a value to it. It's still being refined, and we can account for
Yeah.
more stakeholders and value.
And I just
But
wanna
I threw the
preface
baby.
and
Mhm,
say
mhm.
that it's not just people who are transitioning their gender and exploring being female and feminine. It's also when you go into that space of spiritual awakening, or when you do shadow work and then you say the patriarchy is the enemy because you're kind of exploring this other side of yourself. And I'm sure other people, listeners, can relate to this, whether or not they've transitioned their gender, but just having gone through that phase in their life where they're like, masculinity and patriarchy is the root of all evil, so I'm going to be the opposite of that.
Yeah, right. What's that grounded in? Potentially the transfer from their father. That's their
Mm-hmm.
relationship to the father, then projected onto society instead of healed in that individual experience and time and
Mm-hmm.
again. So like me, I mean, maybe I pattern mapped poorly in the imago of the parental framework, and I had masculinity sourced from my mom in some areas and femininity sourced from my father in some areas, and the map was all miscombobulated, maybe. But regardless, I had read so much about men doing wrong and I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
change it. So I changed the only man I have access to deeply, which is my own self. And
Wow.
I took care of that man and jump on the hand grenade. So that martyrdom and self-sacrifice, when then actually healed, a martyr is one who's able to fully commit. So I fully committed. Now I know that my body is a gift to me that's meant to be loved and cared for, cared through. So coming back in and caring for this man that I am has allowed me to actually understand the healed masculine is that loving presence.
Mm-hmm.
And I can be that demonstration in the world for other
Mm-hmm.
men. And I can father other men. I can mentor and guide other men back into
Mm-hmm.
our bodies. When we are not in connection with the inner feminine,
Mm-hmm.
that's our sensuality. That's taking care of this body. When a woman that we're romantically attracted to comes to us because it's mutual, and then she can feel that we're not taking care of our feminine, what message does she get?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, he's not going to be able to take care of me or relate to me. So I started to understand that.
Yeah.
How I treat my feminine is how I treat every feminine out there in the world.
Yeah.
And the shifts were in me. When I started taking care of this and being a masculine presence in the world, the women I'm actually attracted to were attracted to me. And the
Mm-hmm.
compatibility and polarity started to recenter. And it
Mm.
just, again and again.
What an edge you have on coaching men, having gone through your embodied experience.
Let's talk about how women think. I know, because I installed that operating system.
And then I
Here's where
rewrote the program.
yeah, then I deconstruct. Here's where it doesn't really work inside of our bodies. Here's why.
This is where it breaks down.
So I love how you're sharing all of these insights from the detransitioning, retransitioning. I'm not quite sure the terminology here, but can you help our listeners understand that period of Ava? You as Ava was 7, 8 years.
Yeah.
And then we explored a bit about that moral, ethical boundary of the family. How did you, or when did you make that decision that you were like, you know what, I'm going to transition to Kodah. I'm going to transition.
Yeah.
Mhm. And you two met
Oh,
when he was Ava.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I was always super growth mindset. So building venture backable assets. Let's go. Let's do it. We can use business as a tool to create reality, and we can build infrastructure for others to interface with. Let's go. So I was in Summit Series. Was doing my Viharika and peyote ceremonies. I'd done a little bit of Santo Daime, but I was still injecting estrogen. And I would sit there and meditate all the time and I do all the stuff, but my biometrics were low. There was a week I was working with a coach, Tristan Montoya from Heart Map, really solid brother. And he had me on the Heart Math device. It clipped on my ear and measured my heart rate and some
Hmm.
breath. And one week I had forgotten to take my shot. I was so busy. And my heart rate variability score started going up. And I was like,
Oh.
wait, what's going on? It's like not taking the shot. And my body was regulating itself.
And what does heart
Mm.
rate
A way of
variability
framing.
indicate, just for
Yeah.
people who might not know?
Yeah, coherence. So it's just there's a rhythmic intelligence to the multiple organ systems in our body, and when they're
Hmm.
operating in a sympathetic resonance, they constructively amplify one another. When one is dysregulated or out of harmony, we kind of fall back to the lower vibration of the lowest system until we reintegrate it. So the heart
So
rate
heart and brain
ability,
coherence.
yeah, the heart's ability to come back to its own rhythm,
Hmm.
its own cadence, And that the time it takes to return to that is this heart rate variability. When we're stressed out, it takes longer to come back. When we're grounded, it comes back more easily. And just watch your life shift as you begin to train that ability in yourself.
Absolutely. We deal with all of our clients,
Yeah.
as you
Yeah.
know.
It's really that simple, to be honest. So I'm the year going deeper with that. I'm in the global synchronization events in 2019, beginning of the pandemic chapter. And I had already got the download that, I had a Homo Services software platform of selling to governments, worked a lot to get our first contract with Maryland, and then pandemic made all the special projects budgets go away. So the government basically said, sorry, we can't pay you. And I just to dissolve that company. I had found in the peyote ceremony, I had thought, well, if people are unhoused, why are they unhoused? Well, they're not in their bodies. If you're not in your body, you're not in your identity,
Your
you're not in your
house.
community,
Yeah.
and you're not in your house.
Wow.
Yeah, simply.
Yeah.
So I started to build wearable devices to help people be in their bodies. Jewelry with biometric sensors, neurodiagnostics, respiration, all these different biometrics to just help people be more present. And in that journey, I had a team around me and was doing that. It's hard to raise venture during the pandemic, but we're doing a thing. And I kept failing. Then I discovered that this heart rate variability was going up when I wasn't injecting. So I just said, what if I just stop doing this gender stuff? Just what if I don't do gender and just see what happens? Just do removal based, right? Let me just remove stuff, elimination diet. And I was in my house every day, meditate for an hour and maybe another hour. And I wasn't doing any calls or meetings. So I'm just sit here. I was listening to all the podcasts at the time and just sitting there. I was on Clubhouse a lot and just meditating and talking about consciousness. And I just removed everything from my life. And at that time, I met mentor, I met Gino, Dr. Gino Yu, taught me about consciousness and synchronicities and allowing the world and the field to respond and work with you in your path. And all the synchronicities kept aligning to let's just dissolve everything, sell my house, and let's go and find what's really for me. And I got into dance. And I still had no hormones. I was just like non-gendered being.
When I met you, you're like, I asked what your pronoun was, and you're like, he or they.
Just like whatever you feel. Like language is third person for a reason. It's diagnostic of where you are in the social contract. So you put whatever language that matches the person's expression. That's how it's designed. This whole movement to like shift that is, I think, destructive to freedom of thought, which is freedom in a deep sense. So we can nerd out about that. But so I'm doing no hormones, and I saw Marianne Williamson at a dinner, my going away dinner. She was on a blind date with one of my mentors, and she's like, I don't know what it is, but you're gonna meet somebody in the mountains of Bali, and he's got something for you. I don't know what it is, but that's what I got. If you want to talk about it, let me know. And sure enough, I find myself in Bali not long thereafter, as you do on a spiritual journey, and it was no foreigners. It was during the pandemic. So it was just really Bahasa Indonesians. And I was in one of their containers doing a spiritual process. And the high priest, Siromanku, invited me to his house, which is the temple. And I went deep with him. And it got clear that I had no idea who this person was that I was pretending to be. I had no idea what my name was, my favorite color. I didn't know anything. And he's like, well, what do you want to do right now? It's just like, I want to ride a motorcycle around this island. He's like, go do that. And I did that because I wanted to. And I haven't returned from that ride. So I started just doing what I wanted to do. I always wore the same clothes, even when I was, trying to live as a female. I still wore like this same stuff. So I just started wearing more and looking more congruent in what I was wearing. And my life has just conformed around that. And then it was very clear that, if I don't think about gender, then I'm just a man in society. It's easy. And then if I'm a man in society, what is that? What's my role? Okay, my body's good at these things. Where's my skill? And all of it is just man, masculine, until I got fully aware of some of those linguistic devices that it interrupted my association with myself as man and deprogrammed them, and then allowed that energy to flow. And this is it. I am this. I've always been this. I chose to be here as this. And that choice and that free choice to be born and be alive, what is mine to do? That's the man's work. So I found myself in the Amazon jungle living for 2 months, one with the Ashaminko, one with the Awanawa, and going deep into editing my frame of my timeline and going back into alignment. And I found myself invited to the Sundance with the Lakota, where I went deep into doing what I say I would do when I said I would do it. And I offered my flesh in those ceremonies, and I've now come back and joined men's circles and gone deeper. So that inflection point was really the period of deep stillness, meditation, and no pharmaceutical injections that then allow my body to come back online.
When you say offer your flesh, is that when you wanted to explant?
No, in the Sundance, so first your vision quest is 4 days and 4 nights where you sit in a very small circle by yourself in the woods, surrounded by your tobacco prayers, and you have no water and no food, and you're not supposed to sleep, so you can go sleep. And that is an initiation in its own. And then after that completes, the men are invited to do the work. It takes about 30, 40 hours to prepare for the Sundance. It's a lot of labor and some food and some tea. And then we start the Sundance, which is 4 days, 4 nights, no water, no food. Every day you're dancing in the hot sun. Every morning you wake up into a super hot sweat lodge called a temescal. And every night you do another temescal. So you're cooking, roasting yourself every morning and night, and you're dancing in the sun all day. And on
All
the third
to
day,
tap into vision?
well, this is a warrior initiation, a men's initiatory ceremony where you become a man in the Lakota.
Yes.
And this technology is why the Lakota are the only First Nation military to have ever directly beat the American military head-on conflict. So this was their spirit.
And
And the third day, you lay down and they cut your chest open, and they put this piece of wood in these 2 areas, and they tie it to the tree, and you pray, and you lean back until it tears. And that is an offering. Like, what can we do as men with women bleeding every month and bleeding significantly during childbirth? What can we do to just offer back something?
Wow.
And this is that. And there's other spiritual, the cosmology and the sun and different rays of the sun. And we're preparing to go through this really quantum transfer where we can move on those rays to other dimensions. And that's a whole other deeper layer in the mythology and their cosmology that they operate in that is fruitful to study. I think in the Western frame, we are a little more geometric in our ontology, a little more Pythagoras, and we don't necessarily anthropomorphize these concepts in the same way that these narratives do. So I think there's utility to experience, learn, and study, but then ultimately be who we are in our lineages. So while I sun dance, I'm not Lakota, right? So I live in a Western ontology, and there's benefit in that and value in that. And I study these ways and then learn, come back, and communicate in our world what I learned.
Wow.
a true ambassador.
That's
Global
beautiful. And
ambassador.
that really resonates too with me when I was studying the Hindu tradition and the Vedic sciences. Is I received a message in deep channeling that it's time to return to your father. Your time studying here is done. And it's like, all right, you were a guest. So I was told that I was like a reporter. I'm here gathering information in this other lineage and this deep cultural work to bring back into, as you said, the deep roots of who we are.
Exactly. And they are inviting, and we're receiving the invitation. They are offering, we're receiving it. We're not going to our friend's house and saying, hey, I love that painting. At which point some cultures will be, okay, we would give that to you. So it's not the way. We don't go and say, hey, I heard about this plant. And then, okay, then they'll give us that plant too. It's like, your words have power. So be mindful of what we don't know about the protocols of other cultures, and don't go pointing and asking. Just be grateful for what is offered.
Absolutely. So you've done deep initiation work on a very high expression of the masculine as well. So from my perspective, it's like and this is just one of many deep initiations you've been through, right? And from a perspective that I have, it's like you have cred. You've done the work. Like literally here is the physical work. And that puts you at a certain level. And wow, I haven't done that. Let me honor what you have physically gone out and done.
And we're of capability, right? This is one of the things we say at Flow Genome is beyond your experience within your ability. So this is available. And what I got was there was a part of me that I was protecting myself from that I got very much in contact with in the Sundance. And
Yeah.
now I'm in relationship with that part of me, and I
Yeah.
can be that person fully in the world. So that's the
Mhm.
initiatory experience. Like, hey, I am ready,
Mhm.
and now it's time. And I think this
Yeah.
also could even bridge into some of the entrepreneur stuff where you find yourself in
Yeah.
spaces that you don't feel credentialed for. Well, we've done a
Mhm.
different kind of credentialing.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, you've gone through a whole journey of refining, tuning into, and testing out the bounds of your beingness. And how have you encapsulated that as a business or in your entrepreneurship now, having gone through that whole journey?
Yeah. So I'll say when I was in Bali, also, they were saying, what if money wasn't a thing? What would you really want to do? And I
Mhm.
just kept talking about the future, like our legacy. Like, I don't want my children to be hunched over and staring at screens. I want them to be heart open, connected. And they're
Yeah.
okay. That's disintermediating screens from digital participation. That's wearable devices. I was working on that for a while. But I got from that world of this thesis. There
Mhm.
is work to be done so that our kids are not hunched over and we're not heating up the planet. We're not extracting resources. There is work to do to make the technologies and conveniences more related to the living systems that they're sourced in. That I call emergent intelligence. It's a think tank and studio where we look at the future and what needs to be built such that we can arrive and participate as that future
Mhm.
together.
Emergently.
So, I think a lot about our movement, our energy and movement systems, how we move around the world,
Mhm.
and our bodies, our health, right? And then our minds. So it's really full stack. I'm currently a strategic advisor for clean tech IP deployment. So there's a biodiesel company with 90% efficiency on feedstock that already is contracted with major fuel companies in the world. And we're now aggregating land and to optimize some of the utilization of the acreage for biodiesel production. And then there's a clean water technology that's net zero that we have already installed in one city, and we're refining that as TRL6. We want to get it up to TRL7 so we can deploy that in other municipalities. And we have partners with the Global Solution Institute, a dear friend of mine's family runs, that does this financial enablement and government purchasing through trade associations and Fulbright alumni networks. So really, really tuning into how to get technologies to municipalities yesterday such that we can have a really stable civilization for the future. And so that's really grounded here now.
So real
We're also
quick, you
looking.
went from riding that motorcycle from that Balinese priest house to now doing like global massive projects.
Yeah, well, I mean, in between then it was we were working on an M&A fund for biohacking wellness centers. Let's just roll up all the healing centers and build this infrastructure of the future of wellness.
Mhm.
And that's where Clifton, you and I met, and all the brick and mortar med spas were distressed because you couldn't go in per
And
times
there's a
remote.
laundry list of projects that Kodah has
Yeah,
been a part
yeah,
of and is
yeah,
actively
yeah,
cultivating. My question to you is, how did you manifest them? How are you part of those conversations? What's going on in your mind as these massive game-changing things are coming to you?
yeah. When we are programming our self, particular activating system,
Mhm.
subconscious, NLP, we really can place an order that we
Mhm.
want and anchor that and then just be in relationship with the field and see what synchronicities emerge.
Mhm.
So I was first getting really clear on what it is that I believe needs to be done.
Mhm.
And then in the subtext of my listening, the shortest point to get to that conversation would emerge because I would
Mhm.
be what I was naturally talking about. I'm on the
So
dance
placing an
floor.
order with the universe
Yeah.
and then seeing what comes in, what you receive.
And being in action. So, and what
Yeah.
action does anything. So go to an ecstatic dance and talk about it.
Mhm.
And you're in that flow, and then you're dancing with somebody you're vibing with, and then you
Mhm.
talk afterwards and, oh, you should talk to that person. And you get on a call with
Yep.
them, oh, you talk to that person, and then boom. And it's true, and it's passionate, and it's clear, and it's resonating with the person who has linearly credentialed themselves to be operating in that space. And then because of
Mhm.
how true and how sincere your conviction is, they're like, let me bring you up to speed on how this industry works. And
Mhm.
now you have somebody who's lovingly giving you mentorship because you're actually lovingly receiving it and
Mhm.
deeply, deeply aligned with it. So that happened again and again. And I just learned everything about funds and fund of funds. And I found myself through the consciousness conversation, spiritual conversation, and embodiment conversation, meeting with these ultra high net worth individuals who that's
Mhm.
really deeply focused in their lives. post money, right? They're unlimited at that point. And I'm in Dubai, and I'm talking about consciousness, and then we dovetail into how does this get built, and then they have all the financial technology, and then I learn that game. And then I'm in London, or I'm in New York, Miami, LA, and meeting people in the same conversation who then, oh, by the way, are doing it. And then they're, hey, we need to pass the torch. Like, we're getting retirement age. Are you in? And I'm like, I'm in. Where's the jersey?
How does it feel to sit at those tables with those ultra high net worth individuals, with people of power and influence in the world? I know it's a journey of acceptance that you're there and why you're there in the first place, right?
Yeah. People are people. One of the things that I got really clear on when all the doomsday language would come up and the making them wrong, when our human system sees an institution that's bigger than we can actually fully make sense of, we make it the demon or the dragon so we can be the hero. And that's a psychological mechanism. So we look at World Economic Forum and it's like, that's the demon. And we then bias towards conspiratorial assumptions so then we can be the hero. But really, you go there and it's just people who are trying to do good. And this is a complicated ecosystem. What do we do? What are you doing? What are you doing? And yeah, there's some bad actors, but there are really some very good actors in that. How do we take on the responsibility of building legacy for our species? And that's where the conversations are, and the global conversations. Globalism can be beautiful, can be good, and can have cultural diversity, ideological diversity within global infrastructure. And I think that's necessary. Look at Star Trek. So when I found heart-centered people who are thinking globally and acting locally, Global Shapers was an on-ramp to the World Economic Forum for me. I just kept getting that affirmation. But more specifically, when I first met up with a dear friend, Martine, and we were talking consciousness and great Zoom calls through a Clubhouse conversation, and then go to her house. And it's like, oh, wow, the vehicle's outside, like the Maserati, the roundabout, and her staff comes out, opens the door of my car and brings me tea in the waiting room. And this is her house. And then her husband comes and has a thing of whiskey from George Washington still. And it's like, what am I dealing with? And then we get into conversation and, oh, I'm talking to my friend Martine. Got it. Cool house, great taste, right? But I'm talking to a human here who's alive and in love and just like me. And those material things, it's just another part of the game we can choose to play or not. And I do choose to play that game because I think it helps my human animal feel good. But I also don't want to over extract, and I want to do it ethically.
And having a seat at the table to help emergently realize the future that we want to head towards. And I've always seen you as a visionary and optimist about that future with technology. There's a lot of narratives out there in the conscious communities about the conspiratorial things that you're talking about, demonizing those larger congregations of people and three-letter acronyms that are, creating policy and global infrastructure.
Yeah.
And I just love that you provide an alternative perspective to that, to not see it all as bad and just like blanket everything all together that, this is bad, this is good, making an enemy, like you said.
Thank you, Victoria. It's really restraint, practicing intellectual restraint, knowing what I don't know and being okay and grounding myself, acknowledging when I'm triggered based on too much awareness too fast. And then am I ready to go deeper in the conversation? And then actually learn about the nuances and the distinctions and be able to then come back and assess and then go back in. And when you get to a level in business and in life, it's not about making the other person wrong. It's about making us both better at being who we are here to be. And it's really, how can I help you? How can you help me? And where's the win-win? And there's an infinite game, right? We're not trying to win the game and implicitly end the game. We're here to keep it going. So it's a different frame. And in that, when we're playing that infinite game, we are receiving from one another and calibrating and upgrading. So with that, I was able to then go deeper with some folks, and not center that, hey, I need to make money off the time we're spending together, but be like, you're an awesome human and you've got wisdom and you did a thing and I want to just learn. And it's the point where I would have months where I could barely even pay rent. And then my friend's, selling another property for 13 million. And I'm just like, can you cover lunch today? But if you play it right, they happily will cover lunch or put you up in a hotel for free because that's easy and that's hosting and that's beautiful. But if you're too resistant and judgmental, you won't be able to receive. So
Yeah.
there's
And
an
Kodah stayed
openness.
in the Burj Khalifa in the
Yeah.
penthouse.
Yeah. So a brother, had his staff pick me up from the airport, put me up in a
Yes.
place in the Burj, and then had a whole villa set up for me because I
Yep.
was like, I am here to learn. I don't
Mhm.
have much materially right now, but I'm hard on and I'm mined as best as I can be. And he saw something in me and said, let's explore. So he essentially financed me for 3 months to do that.
The
Um,
respect and humility
yeah. Yeah. And
and
not being above any
receptivity.
job, whatever you needed, I'm happy to do it. And also within my morals. So yeah, I
Mhm.
would say that people are just people, regardless of their status. Status is just a game. And outside of the game, we're humans and we choose to play the game and we just coordinate based on experience and rank. There's a
Mhm.
concept called dynamic subordination, which is when someone has more flow, you tune into them as a tuning fork.
Mhm.
So it's in VUCA scenarios, volatile, uncertain, complex, adaptive situations.
Like room
You can't always,
entrainment, like someone entrains the room with
yeah,
their magnetism. Mhm.
yes. And this comes from the Navy SEALs actually, but it would apply in that sense too. But there's
Mhm.
under fire, you can't always default to the SART. Whoever's got the best read on the situation, you kind of default to them regardless of
Mm.
their rank because you're all a
Hierarchy,
coordinating
yeah.
macroorganism, right? Hierarchy is
Mhm.
adaptive
Yeah.
under stress. So I say that, like, if we're just in flow together, rank dissolves. Sometimes I'm on a riff and then they're listening to me. Sometimes they're
Mhm.
on a technical delivery of what needs to be done or how it will be done, and I'm listening to them. We all have our points in which we
Mhm.
are holding more flow in the moment.
Mhm. And your beingness is such that to riff with flow and your incredible constructs of the English language that bend
Hey,
people's minds to conceptualize sometimes, but it all makes sense when it lands.
thank you. That's the thing. It's getting back into logos. Otherwise, you're
Mhm.
just spinning wheels around.
Yeah, and if there's things that bring people out of that flow or resistance to follow that
Mhm.
fluid hierarchy, is that where perhaps some of your coaching comes in, or how do you help people continue at that high levels of conversation, at those deep, conscious, futuristic conversations?
Yeah, thank you. So this is a self-worth conversation. So when our programming gets challenged, there's a red line we hit. It's like a ceiling in our
Mhm.
conscious because we're so comfortable at the level of success, personally, socially, relationally, materially, that we have. And when we go above that, it's dangerous and unfamiliar. So we subconsciously or unconsciously self-sabotage, bring us back
Oh, yeah.
down. So that's information. So the goal is playing into the game. So we're all, in this level of vibration. The platform we're all on, the
Mhm.
business is now vibrating here. And if someone on the
Yeah.
team falls off, we all want to bring, we're not that person, as that person who
Yeah.
caused to derail the moment, we feel bad. Like, oh, I did it. I ruined it. Oh my God. And we then spiral into that red line and crash it down. But
Yeah.
our team wants to hold it. Our team is like, no, we got you, brother.
That
Right?
was one of the major lessons actually I learned during our time working on Earth intelligence, is that creating presence and upgrading our nervous systems to receive that which we were calling in, and especially the size of the magnitude of what's being called in, making sure that the vehicle can handle that, can contain it, that there's no self-sabotaging mechanisms, no imposter syndrome
Yeah.
once it's here.
Yes, exactly. And so that being one example for sure in the fund to fund space, the responsibility of connecting with such a like the stream that those financial mechanisms, a lot of capital flowing through those streams. So
Mhm.
the rate of flow is high. It's like a faster flowing river.
It's a
So it
hose, it's
matters.
a river,
Yeah, it's a
yeah.
fire hose sometimes. So you just got to make sure your conduits are well sealed, right?
Mhm.
But in the coaching work specifically, that information is what we work with. So I have some technologies, some language-based technologies that we program in, repeat, and when we say
Mhm.
certain, I am a gift, believers and supporters surround me. First line of about
Mhm.
100 lines that we have in this document that we
Wow.
work on. And I can look at the vocal tone and the embodiment,
Mhm.
and it's all right there.
Mhm.
And you see, like, let's go into that. And all of that awareness comes out and we workshop what frames are underneath of that, what mechanisms are
Yeah.
in underneath of that, and we can see it. We can get the pros and
Mhm.
cons of it, and really get, okay, is this complete? This is a tool that I built when I was probably 6 years old, and
Mhm.
I'm still applying it here in my life.
Yeah.
Hold that on the toolkit, but maybe build a new tool, and then shift it back in and see how your resonance changes. So we go through these sentences, and there's a
Mhm.
whole host of well-being practices, a lot of qigong, a lot of meditation that I work with, and then I work with some ceremonial plant medicines and some psychedelics and integration thereof. And whatever ecstatic technology is your flavor, we can find something that gets you into gnosis. But going in and finding where is your language out, and then what can we unearth, become conscious of, and then reintegrate such that we can actually be who we're creating ourselves as, who we are truly being.
That's beautiful.
Beautiful.
Yeah, we do that in our work as well, certain codes.
Yeah, we downloaded these codes and there's embodiment mechanisms to see how well they're embodied and how much that program is installed based on like if we're hitting a discord in the energy, oh, that one's not really resonating, or there's slipping up saying that one, or it's just in the body language and in what's manifesting.
And looking into
100%.
full body vibrational
Yeah.
entrainment with those codes as well. So it's beyond the neurolinguistics. So exciting. And I think that's a beautiful point to transition to sharing with the listeners how they can get in touch with you. It seems like there's so much to cover moving forward, and we've just hit the surface in today's episode. But where can
Yeah, it was a lot of
people
fun.
find you? How can they participate in what you're bringing?
KodahPip.com, the home place for the world of Kodah and emergent intelligence, and my coaching I call core tech, or core technologies of who we are as humans, where we go deeply human. www.kodahpip. And we'll have it linked. I'm also on Instagram at Kodah_Pip, and my LinkedIn it has a lot of the flow genome content, which we didn't go into too deeply today, but that is one of the key ways I stay grounded. It's outdoor leadership. So we bring in management consulting from the boardroom to the back country. And that's where a lot of the folks who've seen so much that doomsday seems like the only way. And we come back, feet on the ground, stay awake, wake up the others. And that's really where we build homegrown humans together. So we take that to companies. When I go one-on-one with someone, I do that work, a lot of masculinity coaching, some relationship stuff. And there are some women who come to me case by case, but if it's a fit. And if that individual has a company, I'll often recommend they go through the Flow Genome corporate offerings as a complement to my work. And I can be there, ride shotgun on that journey with them and just go deeper with that content as well. And that's it. I'm a blogger and I'm a podcast guest, it seems, more and more.
That's amazing. And I know also that you're working on a book about your journeys through consciousness, through gender transformation and reintegration.
Yeah, stay tuned is really the best thing to say. That is the first 2 hours of my every day. And it is an amazing 2 hours where I get to just download on these chapters. And I encourage anyone to write a book. When you write it out, it helps your thinking. Going back in and writing these chapters, and it's really what happened, then what I got from it and how you can apply it in your life. That goes through every chapter of my life. There's a bunch of titles working right now, but I call it Legend of Robots. There's the Song of John, the Song of Ava, and the Song of Kodah.
Oh my gosh. Well, it was such a pleasure having you on this show. Thank you so much for your presence, for your vulnerability, for your authenticity, and everything that you bring in your beingness. We really enjoy spending time with you in this way. And now listeners get to drop in on that conversation like a fly on the wall. And we always have interesting conversations, the three of us.
Thank you so much for the space today and the time and just your hearts and your ears for being present with me today and with our listeners here. This has been a joy. Couldn't imagine a better way to spend my Friday.
Oh, nice. Well, thank you so much for joining in, and we'll catch you next time.